Chapter 20. The Highlands Stand. The highlands were cloaked in the tranquil silence of early dawn, the soft mist rolling off the peaks like a veil of secrecy. Lady Siobhan McGregor and her followers had gathered at the border of their sacred land, a formidable assembly of Highland ponies and resolute men and women. The sun was just beginning to break through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the rugged terrain. At the border, a convoy of sleek white medical vans stood like a line of grim sentinels. Each vehicle was emblazoned with the emblem of Femine, and their shiny, futuristic designs starkly contrasted with the natural beauty of the highlands. The little girls who operated the vans, their eyes blank and their faces emotionless, were arrayed like a battalion of dolls. The vans were equipped with cutting-edge technology designed to facilitate the implantation of the Harmony Nexus devices. The van's automated systems hummed with the promise of compliance and control, and the little girls inside were linked through a network of Harmony Nexus implants, allowing them to act as a single, unified voice under Evelyn Grace's command. Lady Siobhan, astride her Highland pony with a commanding presence, led her followers to confront this encroachment. The ponies pranced restlessly, their muscular bodies shifting with a blend of strength and elegance. The horses' coats gleamed in the morning light, their manes flowing in a gentle breeze. The leader of the little girls, a girl no older than 12, stood at the front of the convoy. As Lady Siobhan and her followers approached, the girl's eyes, though seemingly vacant, sparkled with the cold efficiency of the regime. The van's PA systems crackled to life, and a disembodied voice, Evelyn Grace's, resonated through the highlands. "People of the highlands," Evelyn's voice boomed with an air of authority. "You stand at a crossroads. The Harmony Nexus offers you a chance to transcend discord and discontent. Embrace the harmony we offer, and be part of a unified society that thrives in peace and order." Lady Siobhan's eyes narrowed, and she raised a hand to silence the murmurs of her followers. "We will not be swayed by your false promises," she declared. Her voice carried across the clearing, imbued with the strength of her convictions. "Our land is free from your control, and we will not yield to your invasion." The little girls, connected through their Harmony Nexus implants, began to speak in unison. Their voices merged into a single chilling chant that echoed through the highlands. "Submit to the Harmony Nexus. Embrace the unity. Your resistance is futile." As the chant continued, the girls' voices became a distorted, mechanical chorus, amplified by the van's PA systems. The sound was both haunting and insistent, a relentless reminder of the regime's reach. Lady Siobhan raised her staff high, rallying her followers with a determined cry. "Push them back! We will not let them corrupt our land with their tyranny." The clash was swift and intense. Siobhan's followers, with their Highland ponies rearing and snorting, moved to confront the vans. Using makeshift barricades and natural terrain, they effectively blocked the vans from advancing. The medical vans, unable to penetrate the determined resistance, were forced to. The little girls inside the vans, their faces now reflecting fear rather than the blankness of their implants, began to retreat. They moved with a sense of eerie uniformity, their expressions showing hints of distress as they were driven away by the resolute Highlanders. As the vans backed away, the girl at the head of the convoy raised her voice one final time, amplified by the PA system. "We will return after the grand gyno-fascist gala. The Harmony Nexus will be completed, and your resistance will be crushed." The chant resonated through the highlands, a grim reminder of the regime's persistence. But as the last van disappeared from view, the atmosphere in the highlands shifted. The air was filled with a renewed sense of determination and resolve. Lady Siobhan, her face etched with the lines of both triumph and concern, turned to her followers. "We have pushed them back for now, but the real battle awaits us at the gala. We must prepare ourselves for what is to come." Her followers nodded in agreement, their spirits lifted by the victory and the promise of continued resistance. The ponies, now calm and collected, were led back to the stables, their coats brushed and their manes braided with care. In the peaceful solitude of the highlands, the resolve of Lady Siobhan and her people was strengthened. They knew that the upcoming gala would be their greatest challenge yet, but they faced it with unwavering courage, and the knowledge that their fight for freedom was far from over. Chapter 21. The Dispute of the Grand Hall of State glittered with opulence, a testament to the gyno-fascist regime's self-importance. Under the grand chandeliers, casting their elaborate prisms of light, the leaders of the Obsidian Order and the Ivory Coalition convened for what was supposed to be a strategic meeting. Yet, as the hours passed, it became clear that their concerns had devolved into a whirlwind of frivolous details about the grand gyno-fascist gala. Lady Veronica Blackwood of the Obsidian Order and Evelyn Grace of the Ivory Coalition took their places at the marble table, their entourages seated around them. A hush fell over the room as the meeting began, but it was not long before the focus shifted from critical issues to the minutiae of gala planning. First on the agenda, Lady Veronica announced with feigned enthusiasm, is the selection of musical entertainment. I propose a classical orchestra to elevate the sophistication of the event. A classical orchestra? Evelyn replied, her tone incredulous. I was thinking more along the lines of a contemporary jazz ensemble. It would add a touch of modernity. Jazz? Really, Evelyn? Jazz is far too informal. We need an air of grandeur and timeless elegance. An orchestra will provide that, Veronica insisted. Well, I believe contemporary jazz has a certain refinement that classical music lacks, Evelyn countered, folding her arms. Let's just agree to disagree, Veronica said, her patience wearing thin. Lord Gareth, what do you think? Lord Gareth, seated slightly behind the women, cleared his throat nervously. Well, if I may offer a modest suggestion, perhaps a blend of classical and jazz might, cater to both perspectives. Interesting idea, Evelyn said, slightly mollified. We could consider a hybrid performance. Let's go with that, Veronica agreed, though reluctantly. Moving on to the table settings, Lady Veronica said, eager to shift focus. The discussion on table settings proved to be equally contentious. Lady Veronica championed the use of gold-plated cutlery, claiming it was essential for an opulent presentation. Evelyn, however, preferred sleek, minimalist silverware. Gold-plated cutlery is garish, Evelyn declared. Silverware will complement the gala's understated elegance. Garish? Gold adds a touch of grandeur. Silver is too bland, Veronica shot back. Let's just agree to disagree, Evelyn said, her voice tinged with frustration. Lord Gareth. Gareth, fidgeting nervously, offered his input. Perhaps if I might suggest we could use silver cutlery with gold accents. It might strike a balance between, grandeur and subtlety. That's a fair compromise, Veronica conceded. Perfect then. Moving on, Evelyn said, her mood slightly lifted. The debate over the floral arrangements was next. Lady Veronica wanted an extravagant display of rare orchids and lilies, while Evelyn argued for simple, understated tulips. Orchids and lilies will overwhelm the space, Evelyn argued. Tulips are subtle and refined. Subtle? They're plain. Orchids and lilies will bring vibrant color and elegance, Veronica insisted. Let's just agree to disagree, Evelyn said, throwing her hands up. Lord Gareth? Gareth looked distressed but cleared his throat. Maybe, just maybe, we could use a combination of tulips with a few orchids and lilies for accents. It might, provide a touch of both elegance and restraint. Very well, Veronica agreed, though still visibly annoyed. The topic of seating arrangements followed. Lady Veronica envisioned elaborate, throne-like chairs for the VIP guests, while Evelyn favored streamlined, modern seating. Throne-like chairs are ostentatious and impractical, Evelyn remarked. Modern seating will provide comfort and sophistication. Ostentatious? Thrones are a symbol of authority and grandeur. Modern seating lacks character, Veronica argued. Let's just agree to disagree, Evelyn said, clearly tired of the argument. Lord Gareth, sweating under the pressure, suggested, if I could propose, perhaps we could have a mix of throne-like chairs for the most distinguished guests and modern seating for the rest. It might satisfy both preferences. All right, Veronica agreed, moving on. The discussion of the event's color scheme was equally fruitless. Lady Veronica was adamant about using deep emerald greens and rich purples, while Evelyn preferred muted greys and blues. Emerald greens and purples are too bold, Evelyn argued. Greys and blues are more refined. Bold colors are necessary to make a statement, Veronica retorted. Let's just agree to disagree, Evelyn said, exasperated. Lord Gareth? Gareth, visibly relieved to be asked, suggested, perhaps we could use a primary color scheme of greys and blues with bold accents of emerald and purple. It might, incorporate both styles. Agreed, Veronica said. The final point of contention was the dress code for the gala. Lady Veronica wanted elaborate gowns and tuxedos, while Evelyn suggested simpler, more casual attire. Elaborate gowns are a must for such a grand occasion, Veronica said firmly. They reflect our status. Casual attire would promote comfort and modernity, Evelyn countered. Let's just agree to disagree, Veronica said, her patience exhausted. Lord Gareth? Gareth, eager to provide a solution, offered, maybe a dress code that includes a range of formal to semi-formal attire? It might, allow for both elaborate and casual choices. That's a good solution, Evelyn agreed. As the meeting concluded, it was evident that while Lord Gareth had managed to mediate the constant disagreements, the leaders had sidestepped crucial issues in favor of perfecting their gala's superficial details. They had only managed to find common ground on their obsession with houndstooth, a detail that, amidst their bickering, united them. Finally, can we agree on the houndstooth pattern? Veronica asked. Absolutely, Evelyn said with a sigh. Houndstooth it is. With this solitary point of consensus, the leaders adjourned the meeting, their focus fixated on their extravagant yet trivial event, leaving the more pressing concerns of resistance and unrest unresolved. Chapter 22, The Dress and the Gossip. Lady Veronica Blackwood strode into the lavish boutique with an air of entitlement, her presence demanding immediate attention. The shop, nestled in the heart of the city's opulent district, sparkled with chandeliers and mirrored walls, displaying the finest couture of the gyno-fascist regime. A hush of awe followed Lady Veronica, as she was greeted by the boutique's owner and dressmaker, Madame Celeste. Madame Celeste, Lady Veronica began with a flourish, I need a gown that will outshine everyone at the grand gyno-fascist gala. It must be nothing short of spectacular. Of course, Lady Veronica, Madame Celeste replied warmly. Let's begin by discussing the design. What did you have in mind? Veronica waved a hand dismissively. I want something that screams opulence. None of this minimalist nonsense. I want layers, embellishments, and... Before she could finish her sentence, a sleek black cat sauntered into the room, its tail held high. It leapt onto a nearby velvet chair, eyeing the proceedings with indifferent curiosity. Not again, Veronica snapped. This cat is always in the way. Madame Celeste, unfazed, smiled gently at the cat. Oh, that's just Whiskers. He's a bit of a nuisance, but he means no harm. Let me just shoo him away. Madame Celeste tried to gently coax Whiskers off the chair, but the cat remained resolute, curling up comfortably, as if determined to be part of the process. I don't understand why you keep this creature around, Veronica grumbled, trying to adjust her position to avoid the cat. It's not sanitary, and it's incredibly distracting. I assure you, Lady Veronica, Whiskers is very well behaved, Madame Celeste said soothingly. He's just a little temperamental today. Let's focus on the dress, shall we? As Madame Celeste began measuring and pinning fabric, Lady Veronica continued her tirade, her grievances spilling out with each adjustment. Honestly, Evelyn Grace is insufferable, Veronica began, her voice filled with frustration. She has been monopolizing all the power and control for herself when it should be mine. I mean, look at how she's used her position to impose the harmony nexus on everyone. It's clear she's obsessed with consolidating her own power under the guise of societal reform. Her latest scheme to implant everyone with this so-called technology is just another step in her plan to tighten her grip on the state. She's using it to enforce her own agenda and ensure that no one can challenge her authority. It's outrageous. Madame Celeste nodded sympathetically. I understand, Lady Veronica. It's tough dealing with such power struggles. It's not just the harmony nexus, Veronica continued, her tone growing more intense. Evelyn's obsession with control extends to every aspect of our society. She's maneuvered her way into a position where she can dictate every policy, every procedure, and every aspect of our lives. She's managed to turn even the most trivial decisions into a means of asserting her dominance. I should be the one with that level of influence. I've earned it. My strategic mind, my understanding of the state's needs, it's clear that I deserve more control over things. Madame Celeste maintained her professional demeanor, listening attentively. And what about others in the regime? Veronica's face twisted in distaste. Oh, and don't get me started on Lord Gareth. He's nothing but a sycophant, always trying to please Evelyn and never making any real decisions. It's laughable how he tries to placate her, and in the process, makes himself look like a fool. It's as if he's afraid to offend her, even though he's constantly being belittled by the rest of us. He's a pawn in her game, just like the rest of them. Madame Celeste murmured in agreement, her eyes darting to the cat who had now taken an interest in the measuring tape. I see. And what about others? Veronica's frustration boiled over. And then there's Lady Isabel from the Ivory Coalition. Her obsession with houndstooth is beyond ridiculous. It's the only thing she can cling to for a sense of unity. She's the reason we're stuck with that tacky pattern for the gala. Every decision she makes is drenched in her meaningless nostalgia. It's pathetic how she's allowed something so trivial to dictate the tone of our most important event. Whiskers decided to make his presence felt by leaping onto Veronica's lap, purring loudly and batting at the measuring tape. Veronica recoiled in disgust, brushing the cat away. Really, Madame Celeste, this cat is unbearable. Can't you control him? Veronica snapped. I'm so sorry, Lady Veronica, Madame Celeste said, gently picking up Whiskers and placing him on the floor. He's just a bit of a show-off. Let me get him settled so we can continue. As the fitting proceeded, Lady Veronica's complaints ranged from the inefficiencies of the regime to personal grievances with her colleagues. She detailed her disdain for Evelyn Grace's power grab, her frustration with Lord Gareth's sycophantic ways, and her contempt for Lady Isabel's outdated houndstooth obsession. Everyone's so wrapped up in their own little worlds, Veronica said, that they've lost sight of what's actually important. The regime is becoming a joke, and the grand gyno-fascist gala is just a superficial display of their incompetence. It's a travesty. I should be the one leading, making decisions and truly shaping the future of our society. My vision, my capability, those are the qualities that should be at the forefront, not Evelyn's power-hungry schemes. Madame Celeste, maintaining her professional demeanor, listened attentively and offered agreeable nods. It sounds like you've had quite a lot to say about them. The fitting concluded after what felt like an eternity. The final gown was a shimmering masterpiece of gold and silver, designed to dazzle and command attention. Madame Celeste, despite the ordeal, maintained her composure and professionalism. Your gown is ready, Lady Veronica, Madame Celeste said, presenting the finished creation with a flourish. I'm sure it will be perfect for the gala. Veronica took the dress with a curt nod, not bothering to conceal her displeasure with the process. I expect perfection, Madame Celeste. See that everything is in order. Of course, Lady Veronica, Madame Celeste said, her smile not wavering. After Veronica departed, Madame Celeste turned to her assistant and began recounting the details of the fitting. Lady Veronica had quite a lot to say about her colleagues. She mentioned Evelyn Grace's power struggles, Lord Gareth's sycophancy, Lady Isabel's obsession with houndstooth, and others in rather unflattering terms. She feels that she deserves more control and influence over the regime's direction. The assistant, a discreet and efficient individual, took note of the details and promised to relay the information to the informant waiting outside. The informant, clad in a dark cloak, would ensure that Evelyn Grace received the intelligence without delay. As Madame Celeste tidied up the boutique, Whiskers, now resting peacefully in a corner, looked on with a contented purr. Despite the interruptions and complaints, the cat seemed unfazed, perhaps sensing the underlying currents of discontent that swirled around the elite of the gyno-fascist regime. Chapter 23. The Fall of Lady Veronica. The dimly lit room in Evelyn Grace's palace buzzed with a grim sense of urgency. The informant, cloaked in anonymity, stood before Evelyn, detailing the betrayal that had come from Lady Veronica Blackwood. Evelyn's face hardened as she absorbed the information, her eyes narrowing with cold determination. So, Lady Veronica has dared to undermine my authority, Evelyn said, her voice laced with venom. It seems she's been spreading dissent, questioning my control and planning to usurp my position. Yes, Evelyn, the informant confirmed. She's been openly criticizing you and the regime. She needs to be dealt with immediately. Evelyn's eyes glinted with a mix of fury and satisfaction. Very well, I want her arrested immediately. Ensure she receives the Harmony Nexus implantation without delay. We cannot allow any further threats to our regime's stability. As the order was relayed, Evelyn's secret police sprang into action. The elite enforcers, clad in their dark uniforms and masks, swiftly made their way to Lady Veronica's opulent residence. The house, adorned with lavish decorations and fine furnishings, was soon surrounded. Veronica's attempts to resist were futile against the superior force of the regime's enforcers. Within moments, Veronica was apprehended and brought to a sterile medical facility designed to handle the most delicate and invasive procedures. The room was stark, illuminated by harsh clinical lights. Veronica, now bound to a table, glared defiantly at her captors. Her struggle was futile as the medical team prepared for the Harmony Nexus implantation. The procedure began with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Needles and scalpels gleamed under the lights as they were laid out meticulously. Veronica was sedated, but her resistance persisted even in her drugged state. The surgical team, equipped with the latest technology, worked swiftly. The medical team made an incision into Veronica's scalp, exposing the delicate tissue beneath. The Harmony Nexus device, a small yet complex piece of technology, was carefully inserted into her brain. The process was agonizing and invasive, and Veronica's muffled cries of pain echoed through the room. Her eyes darted around, filled with a mixture of terror and defiance. As the device was secured and the incision closed, Veronica's initial agony gave way to a strange, inexplicable sense of tranquility. The Harmony Nexus began to take effect, and a wave of blissful satisfaction washed over her. The initial pain faded, replaced by an overwhelming sense of contentment. Her thoughts became serene, her emotions numb, yet pleasing. The dissent and anger that once consumed her were now replaced by an almost euphoric calm. After the procedure, Lady Veronica was discharged, her demeanor transformed. Her once fiery gaze was now replaced by a vacant stare. The rebellious spirit that had driven her was gone, leaving behind a blank, emotionless shell. Later that day, Madame Celeste and her cat, Whiskers, arrived at Lady Veronica's residence for what they believed would be a routine fitting adjustment. The atmosphere in the house was eerily subdued as they entered. Madame Celeste knocked on the door, which was answered by Lady Veronica. The once formidable Lady Veronica now stood before them with an unsettling blank stare. Her eyes were devoid of the sharpness and intelligence they had once held. The transformation was striking and unsettling. "Lady Veronica, we're here for the final alterations to your gown," Madame Celeste said, her voice tinged with uncertainty as she observed Veronica's vacant expression. Lady Veronica merely nodded, her movements mechanical and devoid of the former elegance. Madame Celeste and Whiskers stepped inside, the cat's eyes narrowing with what seemed to be an almost knowing satisfaction. As Madame Celeste worked on the dress, Whiskers prowled around the room with a certain air of contentment. The cat's eyes, filled with a cryptic sense of fulfillment, followed Veronica's every movement. The final touches to the gown were made in silence, interrupted only by the occasional soft meow from Whiskers, as if approving of the completed work. Lady Veronica remained impassive throughout, her earlier defiance and pride completely erased. Chapter 24, The Grand Disguise. The night before the grand gyno-fascist gala was a scene of hurried preparation and meticulous planning. Hidden in the secret Highland barn, the Heart and the Crimson Coterie gathered, their resolve firm as they executed their bold plan. The air was filled with a rich scent of horse manure and freshly dyed wool. Under the soft glow of lanterns, the members of both factions were hard at work. Their once distinct appearances were undergoing a dramatic transformation. A large, elaborate process was underway, with each member focused on creating a seamless disguise that would allow them to infiltrate the gala. Lady Siobhan McGregor and Marcus led the dyeing operation. The process was intricate, involving several stages. The horses, their once colourful coats now ready for a change, were carefully washed and scrubbed. Once clean, the dyeing began. Black and white dyes were meticulously applied, ensuring an even and striking pattern. The horses' manes and tails were painstakingly dyed to match, each stroke applied with precision to ensure consistency. The horses, their coats now a sophisticated blend of black and white, looked like pieces of living art. Lady Siobhan ran her fingers through the freshly dyed mane of her Highland pony, admiring the results. The once vibrant colours were now subdued into a striking monochrome palette, designed to blend in with the houndstooth pattern that would dominate the gala. As the horses dried, attention turned to the knitting of the tartan blankets. The Heart and the Crimson Coterie members worked in unison, their needles clicking together as they wove intricate black and white checkerboard patterns. Each blanket was a masterpiece of camouflage, crafted to blend seamlessly with the expected decor of the gala. The tartan patterns were a nod to their Scottish heritage, updated to fit their current needs. In the barn, the atmosphere was a blend of concentration and camaraderie. The blankets were laid out across the horses' backs, adjusting and pinning them to ensure a perfect fit. The final touches included adding delicate white tassels and intricate black embroidery, giving the blankets a regal appearance. Madame Celeste, who had joined the group to lend her expertise, was in charge of the final grooming. She brushed each horse's coat until it gleamed, meticulously checking for any stray hairs or imperfections. Her hands moved with practiced ease, her attention to detail ensuring that every horse looked impeccable. As the horses were prepped, the members of the Heart and the Crimson Coterie gathered in their newly knitted attire. Their hair, dyed to match their horses, was styled in ways that complemented their disguises. Black and white plaid patterns were woven into their garments, creating a unified look that mirrored the gala's expected decor. The barn, once a place of rugged, unrefined practicality, had been transformed into a space of elegant preparation. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow on the newly transformed group. The air was filled with the quiet hum of contentment and anticipation. As the final preparations concluded, Lady Siobhan and her followers mounted their horses. The group began their journey to the gala, moving under the cover of darkness. The night was cool and crisp, and the moon cast a silvery light over the highlands. The rhythmic clop of hooves and the occasional snort from the horses were the only sounds that broke the silence. Traveling through the highlands was a careful balance of stealth and speed. The riders kept to the shadows, avoiding main roads and sticking to less conspicuous paths. The roads were uneven and rocky, but the horses, now accustomed to their new coats and blankets, navigated the terrain with ease. Their black and white patterns blended seamlessly with the night, providing effective camouflage. As they moved closer to the gala's location, the terrain began to change. The rugged highland paths gave way to smoother, more cultivated roads. The surroundings became increasingly urbanized, and the once quiet night gave way to the distant hum of city life. The riders adjusted their pace, becoming more cautious as they approached the heavily guarded areas near the gala venue. The city lights began to twinkle in the distance, and the grandeur of the gala's venue loomed ahead. The building itself was an imposing structure, its opulence evident even from afar. The streets leading to it were lined with elegant decorations and guarded by heavily armed patrols. The members of the Heart and the Crimson Coterie knew they had to be extra careful now. As they drew closer, the riders exchanged determined glances. The final leg of their journey required both precision and patience. They carefully navigated through the city streets, making use of every shadow and alley to avoid detection. The atmosphere was tense, but the members of the two factions remained focused on their goal. Eventually they reached a discreet, hidden entrance that had been pre-arranged for their infiltration. They dismounted their horses and prepared to leave them in a concealed area, ensuring that the animals remained hidden from view. The horses, their black and white coats now perfectly blending into the surroundings, were settled and calmed before the riders moved forward. With their disguises perfected and their plan in place, the Heart and the Crimson Coterie approached the gala venue. The grandeur of the building was matched only by the intensity of their resolve. They knew that tonight would be a pivotal moment, and their careful preparations would soon be put to the ultimate test. Chapter 25, The Riddle of Serendel. The Grand Gyno-Fascist Gala was mere hours away, and Serendel, the grand fortress hosting the event, buzzed with last-minute preparations. The towering gates were heavily guarded, with soldiers on high alert to ensure that only those deemed worthy would gain entry. For the Heart and the Crimson Coterie, gaining access to the fortress was their first challenge. As the infiltrators approached Serendel, they were met with the imposing sight of the gates and the stern-faced guards stationed at the entrance. These guards, adorned in their distinctive houndstooth-patterned uniforms, were tasked with a unique form of security, an ideological test in the form of riddles. Lady Siobhan and Marcus, cloaked in their black and white disguises, approached the checkpoint with a mix of determination and nervous energy. The chief guard, Commander Roderick, a grizzled veteran with a no-nonsense attitude, stepped forward. His sharp eyes scrutinized the newcomers. "State your purpose and answer the riddles of the regime to gain entry," Commander Roderick commanded, his voice carrying the weight of authority. Lady Siobhan, maintaining her composure, replied, "We are here to attend the gala. We are prepared to answer any riddles you present." Commander Roderick nodded, a glint of challenge in his eyes. "Very well, here is the first riddle. It reflects the core principles of our regime," he began. "I am the force that binds all together, from highborn to lowly, in any weather. I dictate the rules and define the way, ensuring all voices are made to sway. What am I?" Lady Siobhan exchanged a glance with Marcus before stepping forward. With a hint of playful mockery, she said, "Well, Commander, considering how tight that houndstooth pattern is on you, I'd say it's the protocols of Project 2028. Though I must say, your uniform does add a certain flair." Commander Roderick's eyes narrowed, but he maintained his composure. A faint smile tugged at the corners of his lips, though it was barely perceptible. "Correct. Next riddle," he continued. "Through our core, the unity is true, to comply is the virtue we value, to resist is to suffer the direst fate. What do we call this immutable state?" Marcus stepped forward, his expression serious. "That would be the harmony nexus, but I have to admit, your houndstooth is almost as striking as the ideology itself." Commander Roderick's gaze remained steady, though he seemed slightly more intrigued. "Correct. One more riddle remains." The commander presented the final challenge. "Our gala is a grand display of our might and our unity in array. To falter is to break the vow. The prize awaits those who master the how. What is the ultimate purpose of this night?" Lady Siobhan, with a wry smile, answered, "The ultimate purpose is to showcase the regime's unassailable power and the triumph of our ideology. And I must say, your uniform is certainly a bold choice. Houndstooth really does suit you." Commander Roderick's expression softened, though his eyes remained sharp. "You have answered correctly. You may proceed." The guards stepped aside, allowing the Heart and the Crimson Coterie to pass through the grand gates of Serendel. As they walked through, they were enveloped by the opulence of the fortress. The entrance hall was adorned with lavish decorations reflecting the grandeur and power of the regime. The floor was a pristine marble, and the walls were lined with elaborate tapestries depicting scenes of unity and strength. The infiltrators made their way to a concealed area where they could regroup and review their strategy. The night was just beginning, and their mission was far from over. With their disguises and carefully crafted plans, they were poised to confront the regime and alter the course of their dystopian world. Chapter 26: The Litmus of Compliance. The vast halls of Serendel thrummed with an undercurrent of tension, an unease that seeped through the polished stone floors and gilded archways. The grand gyno-fascist gala was fast approaching, but within the fortress, a new concern was beginning to take root, one that threatened to unravel the meticulous fabric of control that the regime had so carefully woven. Reports had begun trickling in from across Serendel. Authorities were noticing peculiarities in the behavior of certain individuals who had been implanted with the Harmony Nexus. The device, once thought to be an infallible tool of control, was showing signs of malfunction. Compliance issues were emerging, manifesting in subtle yet unmistakable ways. A slight hesitation in obedience, a flicker of doubt in otherwise blissfully vacant eyes, or a sudden deviation from prescribed behavior. Alarmed by these developments, the regime's leaders convened in a secretive chamber deep within Serendel. Evelyn Grace presided over the meeting, her cold, calculating gaze sweeping over the assembled officials. The room was dimly lit, with the only illumination coming from a series of data screens displaying the latest reports on the Harmony Nexus. The Harmony Nexus was designed to ensure absolute compliance, Evelyn began, her voice sharp and authoritative. Yet it seems that even this technology is not immune to the imperfections of human nature. We cannot allow these aberrations to fester and spread. A solution must be found, and quickly. One of the officials, a thin, wiry man with a nervous twitch, spoke up. "We've devised a litmus test, Lady Grace. It's designed to detect any trace of dissent among those implanted with the Harmony Nexus. The test measures neurological responses to specific stimuli, responses that indicate a lack of compliance or, worse, a complete rejection of the implant's influence." Evelyn nodded approvingly. "And how does this litmus test work?" The official gestured to the screens where a series of images flashed in rapid succession. The test presents a sequence of symbols, words and phrases associated with the regime's ideals. The subject's brain activity is monitored in real time. Those who have fully accepted the Harmony Nexus will show immediate, positive responses, reinforced by the implant's conditioning. However, those with latent resistance, or those who have not been implanted, will exhibit a different neurological pattern. These outliers will be identified and dealt with accordingly. Evelyn's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "Good. Implement the test immediately. We must root out any defiance before it can spread." The litmus test was swiftly put into action, with checkpoints set up throughout Serendel. Citizens, already implanted with the Harmony Nexus, were required to undergo the test. The process was deceptively simple. They would sit in a chair, their head cradled in a halo of wires and sensors, as the test administered its stimuli. But the results were far from simple. As the data began to pour in, the regime's enforcers quickly realized that the Harmony Nexus was not the uniform tool of control they had envisioned. The test revealed a spectrum of compliance, with some subjects showing complete submission to the regime, while others displayed varying degrees of cognitive resistance. Those with the highest levels of compliance were sorted into the highest castes, assigned roles that required minimal thought, dutiful servants of the regime, their minds blissfully fogged with an artificial euphoria. They were the new elite, the most trusted enforcers, clerks and bureaucrats, their every action guided by the dictates of the state. Those with middling compliance were relegated to lower castes, assigned menial tasks that required little mental engagement. Their minds, while still under the Nexus's influence, retained enough cognitive function to perform basic duties but were closely monitored for any signs of further deviation. But the most troubling cases were those who showed outright defiance, those who, despite the implant, still harbored thoughts of resistance. These individuals were subjected to a more extreme measure. Their bliss levels were dialed up to the maximum. The implant flooded their brains with overwhelming sensations of pleasure, drowning out any lingering thoughts of rebellion. Under this onslaught of euphoria, their will to resist crumbled, leaving them as little more than shells of their former selves, utterly subservient to the regime. As the litmus test continued to expose dissent, the regime's leaders grew more confident in their ability to control the population. But for the Heart and the Crimson Coterie, who had infiltrated Serendel, the stakes had never been higher. They knew that their ruse could be uncovered at any moment. The Harmony Nexus had been their greatest fear, a tool of control that they could neither understand nor counter. Now, it was also a tool of detection, one that could expose them and their mission to bring down the regime. As they moved through the opulent halls of Serendel, the infiltrators remained vigilant, their minds racing with thoughts of the litmus test. They knew they had to act quickly before they were discovered. The clock was ticking, and the fate of their rebellion hung in the balance. Chapter 27. The Corrosion of Bliss. Evelyn Grace stood alone in her private chambers, the dim light of the room casting long shadows across the cold marble floor. The air was thick with the scent of burning incense, a feeble attempt to mask the pervasive sterility that clung to every surface in Serendel. The walls were adorned with images of past leaders, women who had shaped the gyno-fascist state into the iron-fisted regime it had become. Evelyn's own portrait hung among them, her stern gaze captured forever in oil and canvas. But here, in the quiet solitude of her sanctuary, the mask of unyielding authority slipped away. Evelyn paced the room, her hands clasped behind her back, her thoughts spiraling into the abyss that had consumed her soul. Her mind, ever sharp and calculating, was now a battlefield of conflicting emotions, a war between the iron resolve she had cultivated and the insidious poison that gnawed at her from within. "Bliss," she whispered, the word dripping with disdain, "the most potent weapon in our arsenal, yet the most insidious of all poisons." She approached the large, ornate mirror that dominated one wall of the room, her reflection staring back at her with hollow eyes. Her fingers traced the edge of the glass, cold and smooth under her. "Bliss," she repeated, louder this time, as if daring the mirror to argue. "A tool of control, a means to subjugate the masses, to bend them to my will. But at what cost? What have we sacrificed on the altar of euphoria?" Her voice grew bitter as she continued, a deep-seated hatred bubbling to the surface. "Bliss is not a gift, it is a curse. It destroys the very essence of humanity, strips away the will, the drive, the hunger for something more. It turns people into pliable, obedient cattle, grazing contentedly in a field of lies, and I am the shepherd who leads them to slaughter." She turned away from the mirror, unable to bear the sight of her own reflection. Her steps were heavy as she crossed the room, her mind racing with memories of the countless lives she had crushed under the weight of the Harmony Nexus. Evelyn reached a small wooden box on a table by the window, its surface worn and faded with age. She opened it with reverent care, revealing a single vial of clear liquid. The bliss inhibitor, the antidote to the poison she had so willingly unleashed upon the world. Ironic, isn't it? she mused, holding the vial up to the light. In a world where everyone seeks bliss, I have forsaken it. I have made myself immune to its seductive pull, so that I may wield it as a weapon against others. I have sacrificed my own happiness, my own peace of mind, to serve the state. And for what? She clenched her fist around the vial, her knuckles white with the force of her grip. For power, for control, for the illusion of order, in a world teetering on the brink of chaos. Her thoughts darkened as she remembered the countless faces of those she had condemned to a life of empty pleasure. The Harmony Nexus had promised them paradise, but it had delivered only a hollow existence, devoid of meaning, of purpose. And she, Evelyn Grace, had become the architect of their despair. But I am not like them, she hissed, her voice low and venomous. I will not succumb to the same fate. I will not allow myself to be consumed by the very thing I have created. Bliss may be their prison, but it will never be mine. She placed the vial back in the box and closed the lid, sealing away the only thing that could free her from the relentless burden she bore. The bliss inhibitor was her constant companion, her only defense against the corrosive effects of the Harmony Nexus. It was the one thing that kept her mind sharp, her will unbroken, as she continued to orchestrate the grand design of the gyno-fascist state. Evelyn returned to the mirror, her gaze cold and unyielding. I will not falter. I will not allow myself to be swayed by the false promises of bliss. I will remain steadfast, a beacon of order in a world that craves chaos. She squared her shoulders, her resolve hardening like steel. Bliss destroys, it corrupts, it weakens. But I am stronger than that. I have risen above it, and I will continue to rise, until the world bows before me. With a final defiant glance at her reflection, Evelyn turned away from the mirror and strode toward the door. The time for self-reflection was over. She had a state to run, a regime to uphold, and a populace to subjugate. There was no room for doubt, no space for weakness. As she stepped into the corridor, the cold, impassive mask of authority slid back into place, and Evelyn Grace once again became the unassailable leader of the gyno-fascist state. The shepherd who would lead her flock to blissful oblivion, even as she remained forever immune to its seductive allure. Chapter 28, The Speech of Sovereignty. Evelyn Grace stood alone in her grand study, a vast chamber adorned with relics of power and authority. Ornate bookshelves lined the walls, filled with volumes on statecraft and philosophy. A large mahogany desk dominated the center, its surface meticulously organized, each paper and pen placed with precision. The soft glow of the evening sun filtered through tall windows, casting a golden hue across the room. Evelyn's reflection in the glass was as stern and unyielding as her resolve. She turned her gaze toward the mirror on the far wall, assessing her appearance. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her face a mask of composure. Yet beneath that exterior, her mind raced with the words she was about to deliver. The speech she had spent countless hours refining would be her shield. Her defense against the inevitable question that had been murmured in the halls of power and whispered in the streets. The question of whether she, the architect of the gyno-fascist state, should submit herself to the Harmony Nexus. Evelyn approached her desk, the soft rustle of her tailored suit the only sound in the room. She picked up a sheet of paper, the opening lines of her speech typed neatly across it. Her eyes scanned the words, the culmination of her strategic brilliance and carefully crafted narrative. She began to speak aloud, her voice echoing through the silent study. Citizens of Serendel, loyal subjects of our grand state, she began, her tone measured and commanding. We stand on the brink of a monumental event, a moment in history where our unity, strength, and resolve will be celebrated at the Grand Gyno-Fascist Gala. As we prepare to gather in triumph, a question has arisen, a question that challenges not just the strength of our state, but the strength of its leader. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in before continuing. There are those who have asked whether I, Evelyn Grace, should receive the Harmony Nexus implant, as so many of you have. Let me be clear, I do not ask this question lightly, nor do I shy away from it, for I understand that leadership demands transparency, and I owe you, my people, an answer. Evelyn set the paper down, her eyes narrowing as she leaned forward, as if addressing an unseen audience. I must begin by emphasizing the importance of strategic autonomy. As your leader, it is imperative that I remain free from any external influence, no matter how benign it may seem. The Harmony Nexus is a tool of unity, yes, but it is also a tool of influence. My mind must remain unclouded, my decisions uninfluenced, to protect the very foundation upon which our state is built. My role requires a level of autonomy that the Nexus, by its very nature, cannot afford. Her words rang with conviction, each syllable calculated to convey her unwavering commitment to the state. But there is more, she continued, her voice growing softer, more reflective. As the protector of this state, I must remain vigilant against all threats, both seen and unseen. By choosing to remain unimplanted, I position myself as a safeguard against the potential misuse of the Nexus. My clear, unaltered mind ensures that our people are never subjected to unseen manipulations, that your freedom is protected. Evelyn allowed herself a brief smile, a rare gesture that softened her otherwise stern features. Lastly, I am the embodiment of our state's will, unyielding, uncompromised and resolute. My strength comes from remaining above the influence of the Nexus, from embodying the pure, unaltered spirit of our regime. This strength is what has guided us to greatness, and it is this strength that will continue to guide us forward. She took a deep breath, steadying herself for the final part of her speech. Tonight, I ask you to consider these truths as you cast your vote. Consider the burden of leadership that I bear, the sacrifices I have made, and the strength I must maintain to continue serving you. I do not ask for your vote out of fear or doubt, but out of a deep, unwavering commitment to our shared future. Evelyn paused, letting the silence fill the room, before delivering the final line. This vote is not just about the Harmony Nexus, it is about the future of our state, it is about the strength of its leader. And it is about the strength that lies within each of you to make the right choice. She set the paper down, satisfied with the words she had crafted. Yet, as she gazed out the window, her thoughts drifted to the truth she could never reveal. The truth that had driven her to prepare this speech, to preempt the vote with a narrative so carefully constructed that no one would question her decision. For Evelyn Grace, the Harmony Nexus was not just a tool of unity, it was a weapon, one she wielded with precision, but one she feared more than anything else. The thought of submitting to its bliss, of losing herself to the same influence she had so meticulously controlled in others, was a terror she could never allow herself to face. But that truth would remain buried deep within her, hidden beneath layers of duty, strength, and sacrifice. She would continue to lead, continue to control, and continue to protect her state from the very tools she had created. And as the sun set over Serendell, Evelyn Grace knew that when the vote came, she would emerge victorious, not just because of her speech, but because she had made it impossible for her people to choose otherwise. Chapter 29, The Empty Sanctum. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the capital city of Serendell. The towering spires and ornate architecture of the Capitol building loomed ominously in the night, a fortress of power and secrecy. Within its stone walls, the most guarded secrets of the genofascist state were said to be kept, the plans, the protocols, the very essence of control. It was here, in the heart of the regime, that the infiltrators from the Crimson Coterie and the Heart had come. Disguised in their black and white garb, their horses draped in checkerboard-patterned tartan blankets, they had traveled under the cover of darkness, their destination the inner sanctum of the Capitol building. This was the place where they believed the learned elders of the protocols of Project 2000 and 2008 held their clandestine meetings, where the true puppet masters of the regime pulled their strings. Lady Siobhan McGregor led the group, her eyes steely with determination. Beside her, the members of the Heart moved in silence, their resolve as firm as the stone beneath their feet. They had come too far, risked too much, to turn back now. The group dismounted their ponies at the edge of the building, taking care to tether them in a hidden grove of trees. The horses, loyal and majestic, seemed to sense the gravity of the moment, their dark manes and tails swaying gently in the night breeze. Siobhan took a moment to stroke the neck of her pony, whispering a soft reassurance before turning to the task at hand. The entrance to the sanctum was hidden, known only to those who held power within the regime, but the Crimson Coterie and the Heart had done their homework, and with a few swift movements, they revealed the concealed doorway behind an ivy-covered wall. It opened with a low, creaking sound, as if protesting the intrusion. They entered the sanctum in silence, the air thick with anticipation. The corridors were narrow, walls adorned with ancient tapestries depicting the rise of the gyno-fascist state. The only light came from the torches that flickered along the walls, casting eerie shadows that danced with each step they took. As they moved deeper into the sanctum, a sense of unease began to settle over the group. The corridors were deserted, not a soul in sight. The echoes of their footsteps were the only sounds, reverberating off the cold stone walls. Siobhan's hand tightened around the hilt of her sword, her instincts telling her that something was amiss. Finally, they reached the chamber they sought, the inner sanctum where the learned elders were supposed to be gathered. The heavy doors stood before them, carved with intricate symbols of power and authority. With a shared nod, they pushed the doors open and entered. The chamber was vast, its high ceilings and marble floors designed to impress and intimidate. A large circular table stood in the center, surrounded by empty chairs. The walls were lined with bookshelves, filled with volumes of ancient texts and tomes of knowledge. And yet, the room was empty. There were no learned elders, no secret council waiting to be uncovered. The chamber was silent, devoid of the power and influence they had expected to find. They exchanged confused glances, the weight of their discovery sinking in. Siobhan moved to the table, her fingers brushing over its polished surface. There was no sign of recent use, no indication that anyone had been here for a long time. This can't be right, one of the members of the Heart whispered, breaking the silence. Where are they? Where are the elders? Siobhan's mind raced, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. For years, the learned elders had been spoken of in hushed tones, revered as the architects of the state's control. But now, standing in this empty chamber, the truth began to dawn on her. Siobhan said, her voice steady but laced with disbelief. It's all a lie, a myth created to keep us in fear, to keep us compliant. The realization hit the group like a cold wave. The learned elders, the supposed masterminds behind Project 2028, had never existed. They had been nothing more than a specter, a shadowy figurehead used to control the masses and maintain the illusion of power. But how can that be? Another voice interjected, shaking with the implications. Everything we've been taught, the entire foundation of the gyno-fascist state, is built on their authority. If they don't exist, then what does that mean for everything we know? Siobhan took a deep breath, grappling with the enormity of the revelation. It means that the pillars of the gyno-fascist state, the obedience, the submission, the very concept of power, are based on nothing more than a carefully constructed lie. The elders were a way to keep the populace in line, to create an illusion of an all-seeing, all-knowing authority. But in reality, there is no higher power guiding them. The members of the Heart and the Crimson Coterie stood in stunned silence, the gravity of Siobhan's words settling over them like a heavy shroud. Everything they had fought against, everything they had feared, was an empty shell, a hollow facade with no substance behind it. But what does this mean for us? One of them asked, their voice trembling. If there are no elders, then who is really in control? Siobhan's gaze was steely as she looked around the empty chamber. It means that the power lies not in some mythical council of elders, but in the hands of those who claim it. Evelyn Grace, the leaders of the Obsidian Order, the Ivory Coalition, they are the ones who have used the myth of the elders to manipulate and control. They are the true architects of the gyno-fascist state. But without the illusion of the elders to back them, their power is not as absolute as they would have us believe. And the Harmony Nexus? Another voice asked, desperation creeping into their tone. What does this mean for that? It means that the Harmony Nexus, like the elders, is a tool of control, a way to enforce compliance and subjugation. But now we know the truth. We know that there is no greater power behind it, no divine authority. The Harmony Nexus is just a weapon wielded by those in power to keep us in line. And now that we know the truth, we can fight back. A sense of resolve began to build among the group, a determination to take their newfound knowledge and use it to dismantle the very foundations of the gyno-fascist state. The empty chamber that had once symbolized ultimate authority now represented the fragility of the regime. We may not have found what we were looking for, Siobhan continued, but this discovery is even more powerful. We have exposed the lie at the heart of the regime, and with this knowledge we will tear down the walls of control and reclaim our freedom. With renewed determination, the group turned and left the empty chamber, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The sanctum, once thought to be the heart of the regime, was nothing more than an empty shell, a symbol of the illusion of power. As they emerged into the night, the horses greeted them with soft nickers, their presence a comforting reminder of the loyalty and strength they shared. The infiltrators mounted their ponies, the animals' powerful muscles rippling under their black and white blankets as they began the journey back to their stronghold. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the power they sought was no longer in the hands of unseen elders. It was in their own, and with that power, they would change the course of history.